What's your perspective on kind of the budgeting side of this as recommendation for defense contractors, Matt?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because a lot of what you'll see, especially from DoD's estimates in these new rules around CMMC, is their estimates for the certification costs, right? Because they're basically saying, hey, under DFAR 7012, 19 and 20 sort of together, that's where the work and the cost is of getting compliant to NIST 171, right? So any estimates that they put out for CMMC is just around the third-party assessment and that mechanism for that, right? So that's something to keep in mind if you go and read some numbers from the DoD around certain costs for CMMC, and then you go, oh, well, shoot, once I actually get compliant and maybe work with an RPO and get my certification, it's well beyond that. It's because the DoD in CMMC is saying, these are not requirements to get compliant to NIST 171. These are requirements to pay a third-party certification body to come in and certify you against that, right? So that's where it gets really interesting. As far as the budget on the readiness side, I'm more defer to the RPO, the cyber chiefs of the world to speak to that, but you see it range, right? And again, it greatly depends on, what is your environment? How big is that scope? How big does the actual CUI footprint go? Where all does that go? How many systems internally? How many locations? Do you have physical CUI that's at, several different locations? So scoping can be a big factor, but then once you get into the actual assessment itself, it's relatively straightforward. I would say, I tell clients, without knowing anything about your scope, most organizations that come to us, it's probably between $40,000 and $80,000 for that C3PAO assessment. That's generally what we see. There's some outliers one way or the other, but I'd say like the 95% of the bell curve is falling between 40 and 80K for the actual C3PAO third-party assessment. But again, that does not include any costs for, third-party services, licensing, tools, paying an RPO, any of that sort of stuff, because again, the DoD would not include those in their CMMC estimates.
Yeah, and the DoD themselves has said, yeah, the cost, in clarifying kind of the confusion around that $50,000 mark that they said early on, that's the cost of certification, but the cost of operating compliantly, these requirements have been in place since almost as far back as 2013. So you should have been operating compliantly for all these years anyways. But there's not a good way to kind of put a range on what it takes to get to compliance, because one, you have to assess first, and then two, you have to kind of implement and remediate from there. But for us, the process has always been start with an assessment, lay out a plan of actions, and then drive towards operational readiness when it comes to a CMMC certification. And it all depends on where you're at in the journey.